out. Now, Treasurer Jim Chalmers, he made a very long, hour-long speech at the weekend, and he doubled down today on some of the comments he made in that speech about opposition leader Peter Dutton. Now, he used the word divisive on the weekend, but he also used the word dangerous. Now, he said today that he was standing by his comments that the opposition leader is divisive, but I note that the word dangerous went missing. Here was what Jim Chalmers had to say today.
Most people look around the world and see the divisiveness in politics overseas. They want to reject it, and he seems to want to embrace it. And so the point that I made then and the point that I'm making again today is that our focus is on the cost of living and the fight against inflation. His focus is on dividing people, and that's because that's all he knows and it's all that he does.
Pure politics, that's what it's all about. Let's bring in tonight's political panel talking politics. Liberal Senator Holly Hughes, it was great to see her, and Julia Gillard's former Press Secretary Darren Barnett. Welcome to you both. Can I start with you, Senator? I feel like I'm in a bit of a time warp here. I can take us, and you were there, you can go all the way back. This is how the Labor opposition used to describe Tony Abbott, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and that went so well for them. But it's just extraordinary that these personal attacks on Peter Dutton is basically all they've got left in their armoury. They've completely failed when it comes to addressing cost of living pressures in this country. Everyday Australians are doing it increasingly tough, whether it's at the supermarket, at the petrol bowser, trying to put a roof over the head and food on the table. It's becoming increasingly difficult for Australian families. Yet all this Labor government has is continual personal attacks and smears. And Jim Chalmers, to spend his time making these outrageous statements when Australians are doing it so tough is just ridiculous and insulting to all of those Australians.
Darren, in your time in government, obviously you sit down and discuss tactics with a leader. When you discuss how to portray the person you want to beat in an electoral contest, how much discussion around the table is how much of it should be personal?
I think that, look, Labor Party does it and other parties do it too, is they go to focus groups, they see which words, which phrases, which descriptions resonate with people at a certain point in time. Obviously, that term divisive or divisive has come up at some point, but honestly, it's not a surprise that an opposition leader would try to be divisive. That's their job. They oppose, they open up fault lines in government arguments and they try to exploit those and convince people to come over to their side when they next vote. But that second word that you mentioned, being dangerous, that's a much more risky word to use, and I think that's probably why it's been left in the locker for today's speech. But divisive, I think that's going to be a term that everyone in opposition is going to be described by everyone in government, and when there's inevitably a change of government, they'll just swap talking points and the same descriptions will run in the other direction.
Holly, I mean, Tony Abbott had the gold medal for how to be an opposition leader, put your arguments and get elected. Is Peter Dutton taking a leaf out of Abbott's book and modelling the way he's going to fight this election on the way Abbott did it?
Well, I think Peter is being Peter. I've known him for over 20 years and I think he's doing a great job as opposition leader. And I think, Margaret Thatcher used to say, I love it when they go personal because it means they've got no arguments left. And I think that's the case with this government. And it's interesting, though, using the word divisive or the creating division when we know it was this Prime Minister through the Voice campaign that probably injected the most division this country has ever seen within the communities. So I think they have to be careful here in the ALP because it's very easy to turn around that this is a government that's brought more division to this country, whether it's been how they've dealt with the situation in Gaza and anti-Semitic attacks and their inability to get off the fence and defend our Australian Jewish community and what's been happening, whether it was the Voice referendum, but the continual divisiveness that this ALP government has tried to stoke. I can't see it working well for them as we get closer to the election.
Darren, the choice of the word divisive, what do you think exactly that Treasurer Chalmers is pointing to? Is he talking about the attitude of Peter Dutton to not allow visa holders from Palestine into Australia when they're not being checked properly? Is it division about how we're going to generate power, or is it a general term that he divides the community because of his tough politics?
Well, I think it's a term that resonates in different parts of the country. You'll find, the inner suburban seats of the major capitals, probably the two that you just described, they are issues that resonate. I think, the nuclear power debate, divisive is one way of describing it. It's certainly bold, and we will wait to see how the Australian people take that when they put their vote at the next election. But as I said before, it's the job of the opposition to put up alternatives, and it's their job to open up fault lines in government arguments. And when you're a government minister and you're trying to sell the message of the day or the story of the day, and someone comes along and just completely derails that, you probably get a bit frustrated. But that's part of the rough and tumble of politics, and you just got to deal with it and move on.
We all love a political snub. Queensland Premier Stephen Miles, now, you've got to say, not the most popular bloke in Queensland. Even his predecessor and his one-time ally, Annastacia Palaszczuk, the former Premier, wouldn't endorse him. Have a look at this awkward encounter over the weekend.
Stephen Miles' endorsement, though?
Look, thanks for coming along today. I've got to keep going.
Can we expect to see what...
Not exactly a ringing endorsement. An hour later, Holly, obviously after the video began being sent out on social media, the Premier reached out to the Courier Mail to say that, of course, she endorses the embattled Stephen Miles. Mr Miles would not have been happy boy behind the scenes, I wouldn't have thought.
Oh, nothing more bitter than a former Labor Premier who was tapped on the shoulder for this bloke. I think the writing's on the wall for the ALP in Queensland. They've absolutely destroyed the state of Queensland and continue to drive its economy into the ground. It's probably the most sensible thing Annastacia Palaszczuk's ever done by not endorsing Stephen Miles. Maybe she's thinking of coming back and doesn't want to tar her own reputation. But I can't imagine anyone's out there too heavily endorsing Stephen Miles except for Stephen Miles at this point in time.
Darren, Northern Territory election, we saw obviously the country Liberal Party knock Labor sideways, so much so that Labor is only going to end up, I think, with about 5 seats. You've got Queensland talking of Miles there. They are facing, if the polls are right, something of an electoral wipeout in a couple of months' time. That's 2 dominoes down. How worried would the head office of the Labor Party be about those 2 elections going that way?
Well, it's obviously not a good trend, but equally, there's not a lot of upside for Labor in Queensland or Northern Territory when it comes to the next election. Frankly, the federal result in Queensland for Labor last time around was disappointing. That the seats that were there to be won ended up being picked up by the Greens. And as we all know, whether it's Greens or Teals or Independents, once your seats go to those independent-style candidates, it's very hard to get them back. So I think, look, it's not great. I'm not happy. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat that. But equally, the next election, they're probably not the 2 parts of Australia where it will be either won or lost.